Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Notes of Design. This episode is special to us. It was recorded back in August and it was scheduled up to launch in November. This episode is tribute to Pradeep Nayar, who was a thoughtful leader and a great mentor. He helped thousands of designers and mentored and inspired them. Prayers and fond memories are what we have to remember. Our dearly departed, my most heartfelt condolences. Hi Pradeep, welcome to Notes of Design. It's a pleasure hosting you today on our show.
Hi, Tej. I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
So Pradeep, how's your day going?
Day's going pretty good. It's the weekend and it's right after my son's birthday. So I'm a little exhausted, but I can't complain. It's a weekend.
That's great, Pradeep. So if you could give a brief about yourself to our audience out there.
Absolutely. So I have been somebody that's been working in the tech industry for a little over 2 decades. And it kind of make myself sound really old right now when I say that. But I'm somebody who has transitioned from being more of a developer to a designer. And now I'm a little bit of a designer that's now overseeing both design and product. So I'm somebody who is, I would say, fortunate enough to go from an individual contributor role to a leader role to a leader of leader role. And I've had also the opportunity to work in organizations that were pretty much scaling design or starting to think about design differently. And a few times I've had the chance to start a practice or grow a practice and scale it across an enterprise. I've also had the opportunity to move between different industries. So I've started my work life in the media industry and then moved over to B2B e-commerce, to insurance, and now I'm in hospitality. So I've worked in-house for the most part, but I've had the opportunity to work in different domains. Honestly, I think caveated, I would say I've just been lucky being at the right place at the right time. And today I'm the VP of Global Product Design and Product Management at Hyatt Hotels, which is headquartered in Chicago. It is kind of a tough time to be in hospitality, but I think what's interesting is there's a lot of great challenges, and it's a good time to be there because there's an opportunity to reinvent the wheel and really rethink hospitality in some of these challenging times. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. So what was your journey into design and how did you start? What are your tips to the beginners that you want to suggest?
Sure. It's interesting. Everybody has a different journey into design, and mine's different, but may not be completely unique. I always joke. I tell people I was classically trained as an engineer, and then eventually I realized my true passion was in design. As an engineer, I basically, when I say classically trained, I was somebody that had a bachelor's and master's in computer science, and after working as a developer. Once I had a colleague that dropped a book on my table saying, "Hey, I think you would like this. You should read this." And the book was Don't Make Me Think by Stephen Krug. And, I remember reading that book, and from the time I picked the book till the time I finished it, I was hooked, right? I realized this is the kind of work that I want to do. And this was the early days of UX or user experience, where it was more called usability. From then on, I never turned back. I did a lot of reading on my own, self-taught myself. As a developer, I transitioned more from, going from mid-tier development in the form of Java development to more front-end development with JavaScript. JavaScript was slowly becoming the rage when I started kind of transitioning over to JavaScript in the kind of the mid-2000s. And, I always was more interested in how people used what I built versus how pretty my code looked. And I always knew I was different. But reading that book basically pivoted my trajectory of what I wanted to focus on. So from there, I really transitioned over to front-end development, started incorporating a lot more, usability testing, paper prototyping, Wizard of Oz testing in my work. But I was self-taught. And what's interesting is I was in a company at that time that was going through a transformation. And I had the opportunity to convince a lot of executives to really think about usability and user experience differently. And I did a lot of pitches and selling to higher level executives to then convince them to start a UX practice. And I was one of the first 5 people that were put together in a UX team. There were 2 information architects. I was one of them, and there were 3 visual designers. And so that was my kind of foray into UX. I transitioned from development to UX. And from then on, I never turned back, right? I was part of the team. A few managers later, they let me run the team. And, from then on, I just never turned back. But it's really something that I've been passionate about. And it's been something that gets me excited all the time. For somebody that's new to just design, UX, whatever you want to call it. I mean, some advice I would follow, I would have is, one is be focused on what you're passionate on. Follow your passion. I mean, you could use me as an example. I was a developer and I transitioned to UX and I was passionate about it. And so, if you follow your passion, like, I think work doesn't feel like work. It just feels like life. The other thing I would say is, like, there's no substitute for hard work, right? And what's interesting is, if you're working on something that you're passionate about, hard work doesn't seem like hard work. It just seems like living. And more advice I would think of is, when you start something new and you see a lot of obstacles in front of you, like, take it one step at a time. Don't assume that it's going to be easy, but don't assume it's going to be too difficult to achieve, and just take it one step at a time. And a lot of what I've done throughout my career has happened that way. And a few other things is, when I think about starting your career, it's so important to build your network and to grow it. So as you kind of evolve in your career, don't forget to build on those bridges, maintain those connections. All those things are actually going to help you in the future, and it's helped me in the past too, where people that I knew, people I work with, actually were the ones that helped me find other opportunities. And lastly, I'd say, like, never stop learning. It's, there's so much to learn. I don't think there's enough time in the day to learn everything that's out there, but having a growth mindset where you want to learn and want to continue to grow is the only thing that's going to keep us moving forward in the industry today. The UX community today is not what it was 5 years ago, and I don't think it's going to be the same 5 years from now. And having a mindset of continuously learning is very, very, very important.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, for taking us through your wonderful journey and giving us such great word of advice. So let's begin our episode with designing for omnichannel experiences. So what exactly is omnichannel experience design, and why do we need to design for omnichannels?
That's a good question. I think it's omnichannel design has a lot of definitions. What I like to do is maybe define it in a way that makes sense for me. And the way I think about it is, omnichannel design is really about building a seamless customer experience where the customer, user, guest, whatever you want to call that person or the human, does not have to repeat themselves twice. And that's one way that I've found it interesting to have conversations about omnichannel experiences, because people assume that omnichannel experiences mean that you have features and functionality on every channel, and that's not exactly omnichannel experiences. It's really about making sure you have a cohesive journey across the different mediums a customer can interact with your brand. A customer doesn't really think about you as individual mediums. They may not even know that possibly your mobile team is different from your app team, is different from your customer service team. They look at all of them and think of them as part of a company. And for a customer, they're just interacting with a brand or a company. So it's so important to think about, how do you make that journey contextual? But more importantly, like, how do you make sure that you don't have the customer repeat themselves twice? And that's not a very simple thing to do. And it's something that a lot of companies are struggling with, but I would say, like, not a lot of companies have got it right yet. And it's always something that you want to strive for.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. So basically, what's the process or approach you follow while designing for these omnichannel experiences, keeping in the mind of, the seamlessness among the different aspects? And how do you differentiate omnichannel from multi-channel experiences?
Sure. If you look at the fundamentals of it, when you think about the design process is fundamentally the same. Right? What the nuances are going to be around what you want to actually focus on and what tools do you want to overemphasize. Let me start by talking about a few challenges when we think about omnichannel experiences. The first thing is around, the optimization of the org design. And that's something that a lot of companies struggle with, where the organization is designed in a way that doesn't support an omnichannel experience, right? Because you might have functional silos. You might have a web team and an app team and the call center team all reporting up to different leaders. That makes it hard to do things. So there's a need for organizations to take a very cross-functional approach to thinking about the omnichannel experience. And you want to make sure you're learning a lot from the experts in the company, along with learning from the guests and the customers. So one of the ways to solve for that is really think about, how are teams structured? How are these multidisciplinary teams going to work together? And really, it's about making sure your teams are structured based on a customer journey. And that's something I've seen work really well when you have teams broken out based on the customer journey as the general scaffolding of how the teams need to think about the overall customer journey. You have individual multidisciplinary teams going deep in different parts of the journey. And that's one thing that I've seen work really well, because then everybody's thinking about what the customer is thinking, feeling, and doing. So that's definitely a key challenge, but there's opportunities to solve it by looking at the ways in which the teams are actually structured and formed. Kind of related to that, I would say it's so important for these multidisciplinary teams to think about stakeholders and really build out what a lot of us know are stakeholder maps. And it's not an org structure; it's really a stakeholder map to understand what is impacting that portion of the journey of the guest, and who are the people within the organization that need to be involved, either informed or heavily influence what we actually build. And so that is a key part. Org design is a key part to thinking about omnichannel experience. The other part to omnichannel experience is really around, the challenge in a lot of our organizations is some of the systems are not always interconnected or talking to each other. It's possible some of the core systems are very old and are antiquated, but at the same time, those systems are fundamental to the business of the organization. But it's also possible that parts of the overall architecture that is brand new and is working on a cloud infrastructure. And how do all of these interact with each other and talk to each other is going to impact what the customer experience is going to be. So one of the nice things I've seen work really well, especially when you have challenges of multiple systems within an enterprise that need to work, like an orchestra, like just needs to come together, is by leveraging the customer journey map, but doing what I would consider like the backstage side of customer journey map. And that is really a service blueprint. So doing service blueprints is a good way to really understand what are the systems and things that are underneath the covers that really need to orchestrate the experience the customers are having. So that's the other thing that I've seen is very useful when you think about systems and interconnectivity. I'm sure you're going to leverage your engineering and your development leaders and partners to figure out all the nuts and bolts, but that's the power of the cross-functional collaboration of designers, engineers, product managers coming together and working through problems. And then the third thing I would say when you think about omnichannel experience is how do we make sure organization alignment is happening across goals and initiatives? It's very typical where you have different parts of the organizations that are siloed and have different goals that are competing with each other. It is super important to make sure that the leaders are aligned on shared goals and make sure that there are situations where when there are competing goals that members of the team roll up to the leaders and make sure the leaders can actually sort out priority of what needs to be done when and how. So a lot of what I'm telling you isn't really about the design process. A lot of it is really about system things that are getting in the way. A lot of it is really about org design that's getting in the way. But all of that can be managed by using tools that we as designers use all the time, whether it's stakeholder maps, journey maps, service blueprints. These are all things that can help us do that and make sure that everyone's thinking about the end customer experience.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. What are the few examples in the modern industry that you can point out to that is properly implementation of omnichannel design strategy to help us make it better understanding towards it?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier, but there are not a lot of companies that are doing it extremely well. But in my experience, I think the one company I've experienced this firsthand being a customer is Disney. And if you see like Disney and if you go through the overall experience of staying at a Disney property, using the Magic Band, getting your bags checked in all the way to that gets to your room. And then coming back, you just end up just having to check in your bags from the hotel where you don't have to even go to your check-in counter in your airport. And you come back home and, a few weeks later, you get a hand-drawn caricature of Mickey Mouse, right? They've really taken all the steps and this is like all of what I talked about is just the journey of going to a park or going to a Disney property and then coming back, right? I've not even talked about the experience you feel when you actually go into a park and what each of the rides their experience tends to be. And I've noticed with companies that over-index and focus on all aspects of the service design, they are the ones that are the most successful. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of coordination. And Disney is the only example I can think of at the top of my head of a company that has really taken the effort to really service design their overall experience and think about the omni-channel experience. And they're not perfect, by the way, right? But I've seen them as being a good example. Now, there are a lot of hospitals too that look at opportunities to think about omni-channel experiences. But in a lot of industries where we want to make sure we have a true omni-channel experience, where there's a lot more of a challenge of making sure that the interaction between the guest and the overall company is seamless, but there's so many touch points, and a lot of times there's a lot of complexity underneath the system. So I think it's a something that a lot of organizations continue to strive for, but I think it's the right thing to do, considering how customers operate and function.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. So on a concluding note, I would love you to recommend us 3 favorite books of yours and also 3 people who inspire you the most in this domain.
3 is going to be hard, but I will give you 3, and then we'll see if I might give you a few bonus just to add more to it. When it comes to omni-channel experiences, the book that comes to mind that's almost, I would say, is always on my desk and is more of a reference book that I use all the time. It is This is Service Design Doing. There are 4 authors that wrote that book, but the person I would like to call out is Mark Sticktorn, somebody I know personally and have had the pleasure of working with closely. So that's a great book if you're really getting into omni-channel experiences and thinking about journeys. This is Service Design Doing is a great book. A few other books that are top of mind, I would say, is Inspired, How to Create Tech Products Customers Love by Marty Kagan. That is another one that I would recommend, especially those that are getting into digital product design. It is really good to understand like how to think about building digital products in the new age. And it's music to a lot of people because it is written for product folks, but it talks a lot about like product discovery, things that UX folks do all the time. But it's a great book to get cross-functional teams more aligned to what we should be doing. And the third book I would say is more in the spirit of working in an agile environment and making sure we're being user-centered still. It is user story mapping. So discovering the whole story to build the right product, I think is the full title. It's by Jeff Patton. Another great book to help you really dissect how do you write stories, but more focused around aligning the team around building the right product. Great. Beyond these 3 great books, I would say like the authors of these books are also very inspiring. So Marty Kagan has a lot of good material out there. He posts a lot of blogs, and those are always fun to read. Jeff Patton is an amazing thought leader in the product and agile space that's always got insightful things to share. And if you ever get the opportunity to take one of his classes, those are great. As somebody who's been in the industry for a while, I always find like I learn something new every time I listen to him talk. And then a few other leaders, just to throw out some leaders that I think would I'd consider inspirational. And more on the leadership side, I would say Simon Sinek is one that I'm a big fan of. Adam Grant has a lot of good work out there. He's written a lot of great books, but I think his podcast Work Life is pretty awesome. And then Barry O'Reilly is another person I'm a big fan of with all the work he talks about digital transformation. Again, somebody that I've had a pleasure of working closely with. But there's so much out there. I think there's no shortage of inspiring thought leaders, no shortage of books, and no shortage of podcasts that people can listen to today. But those are just a few.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, for your wonderful time. And we are looking forward to host you again in our upcoming episodes.
Thank you so much, Tej. More than happy to be part of the community and help in any way. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story.